Hello and welcome back to the next episode of VGC Guides, the show where I break down how to use the new damn Pokemon so you don't have to. Just earlier today I hit my first milestone of 50 subs, so I wanted to say a huge thank you to the 50 of you that are already subbed. I'd also really like to try to push to 100 subs by the end of the year now, so if you like Scarlet and Violet content, I post every day and I'd really appreciate a subscription from you. That being said, I'm taking a slight change of direction from where VGC Guides currently was going, as I was talking about the Treasures of Ruin Pokemon. However, those Pokemon are not allowed in VGC right now, so it's not worth covering them now when there are more important Pokemon I could cover. Two Pokemon today, to be exact. We're talking about Tatsugiri and Dondozo. This pair of Pokemon has been terrorizing the ranked ladder for the last couple of days, and has even seen notable performances at the top of the ladder. So without further delay, let's talk about why these two Pokemon are so insane together. Okay, so I think the best way I'm going to be able to do this is to do, obviously, we go typing abilities, stats, move pool, sets, right? So the way I'll be doing this is I'll talk about each Pokemon's different aspects as I go. So we'll talk about Dondozo's typing, Tatsugiri's typing, Dondozo's ability, Tatsugiri's ability, so on and so forth. So, Dondozo's ability, Pure Water. Great defensively, you have a whole two weaknesses, and you have weaknesses to two types and a weakness to Free Dry. So it's really great for a bulky, from a bulk perspective. From an offensive perspective, it's not that great because water, while it hits things super effectively, it's a whole three types. Fire, ground, rock, yeah. A whole three types offensively, so offensively it's not the greatest typing, defensively it's amazing, right? Next we'll talk about Tatsugiri's typing. It's Dragon Water, one of three Dragon Water Pokemon that might exist. There's Kingdra and there's Palkia. There may have been more, I don't recall off the top of my head. Also really great defensive typing. You have two weaknesses to Fairy and Dragon, and then a weakness to Freeze Dry. So yeah, Tatsugiri, really great typing defensively. Two weaknesses. Dondozo, also really great defensive typing, two weaknesses, and then I won't talk too much about Tatsugiri. It's not that special. But now let's move on to this thing's abilities, right? So if we talk about Dondozo's abilities, all three of its abilities are actually quite good, right? You have Unaware, and in a setup-based metagame, Unaware is really great, because you can ignore the other Pokemon stat boosts. Essentially imagine getting your Dragonite to +2, +3 on Dragon Dance, and then Earthquaking and doing the same damage as +1. That's why Unaware is good. Oblivious is also really great because you can't be intimidated, and on a potential physical attacker, you can't be intimidated or taunted. It's more for the intimidate part. Not being able to be intimidated is really great. And then Water Veil, this Pokemon cannot be burned while having this ability, right? And again, so for physical attackers, your Oblivious and your Water, oops, I didn't want to do that. For a potential physical attacker, having Oblivious and Water Veil for your abilities is really great because either you can't be intimidated or you can't be burned, and the opponent won't know until they try one or the other, right? So essentially you put your opponent into this really big 50-50, right off the start of the match. If we're talking about Tatsugiri's ability, which is the really interesting part of this one, Tatsugiri's ability Commander is the only ability you'll probably be using on this Pokemon. Tatsugiri will go into Dondozo's mouth and be unable to be damaged from attacks. Dondozo can no longer switch out, and Dondozo gets an Omni boost of +2 Omni boost, right? That's +2 attacking stats, defensive stats, and speed. So that's kind of why this is insane, right? You essentially get a Pokemon on the field and it gets to sit there for free. And then Dondozo gets +2, right? So now we've seen really broken abilities in the past before, and it's been matched by pretty underwhelming stats. And Dondozo's stats are anything but underwhelming, right? 150 base HP is really big. We talked about Ting Lu the other day, who also had a really high HP stat of 155. 115 defense and 65 special defense. Well, the 65 special defense isn't great. Coming off of 150 HP, it's actually really tanky, and then 115 defense is also insane. This actually feels a lot like Ting Lu with 155 and 125 80, right? So defensively, this Pokemon is a lot like Ting Lu. It's a little less specially defensive at first. The 65 attack doesn't matter, and the 35 speed is actually quite slow. Now, when you consider you get an Omni boost here, right? 100 attack is okay. When you have an Omni boost, your 167 attack now becomes 334. Your defense stat gets really high. Your special defense stat even gets pretty respectably high. Basically, like, all your stats go above 200, except your speed, obviously. But even then, this thing with like max speed at a neutral nature, 87 doubled is 154. It's still enough to outspeed a good few Pokemon. Your defense gets to, like, has the potential to, your special defense has the potential to get really high. Your defense has the potential to get really high. Your attack does get really high. Like, all your stats get really high with an Omni Boost. Now, if we talk about Tatsugiri's stats, they're not technically as important until Dondozo faints, but 68 HP, 50 attack, 60 defense, 120 special attack, 92 special defense, 82 speed. So, like, defensively, it's not great. You have low HP, low defense, decently high special defense. Defensively, you're not taking many hits. You're quite slow. You're like slower than Baxcalibur, which was one of the many things holding Baxcalibur back right now. Is just that it's too slow. But you do have a pretty respectable special attack. And then with Water and Dragon type moves, like pretty spammable moves that tend to have like somewhat high base power, like the special attack is reasonable. You can do an attack and like you can make an attack and do some damage with it, right? And real quick, I think I'll talk about Tatsugiri's moveset first, just because it's significantly less interesting than Dondozo's. You pretty much have like 4 or 5 moves that you can probably run. You've got like your Muddy Water, you got Dragon Pulse, you've got Protect. You could technically do Chilling Water if you wanted to. I don't recommend it, but you could. You could do Icy Wind as well if you wanted to. Other than that, like Draco Meteor's in here somewhere. And that's basically like all you got. This thing doesn't have great moves. But it's fine because it will. The idea is to not have Tatsugiri on the field at all. Once it's off the field, the goal is to get it. Or once Dondozo's off the field, if your Tatsugiri is still somehow alive, the goal is just to get it gone as quickly as possible. Anyways, it doesn't have great moves outside of itself. Now we talk about Dondozo's moveset, and this Pokemon has also a very straightforward moveset, but there's a lot of potential in this moveset, right? So the first move we're going to talk about is Order Up, right? 80 base power Dragon type move, and depending on the Tatsugiri form, it raises a certain stat, right? So if you're Curly Tatsugiri, you get an attack boost. If you're Droopy Tatsugiri, it's a defense boost. If you're Stretchy Tatsugiri, it's a speed boost, right? So each of those are really great attacks, right? You can use a speed boost form and actually start outspeeding Pokemon even with your base 35 attack. You could do your Curly form and boost your attack indefinitely if they're trying to lower it with like Intimidates or Burns or Parting Shots. Or you could use Droopy. This is probably like the least common Tatsugiri form you'll see. Just because like this thing already has great defenses, so there's no real point. So yeah, that's Dondozo's Order Up. You also get a new move, Wave Crash, which is just Water type Flare Blitz, 120 base power, does recoil physical. Really cool to see that water types are getting like better stat moves than like Aqua Tail, which can miss, or Waterfall, which is low base power. So this Wave Crash. This Pokemon also gets, I saw it in here somewhere, it gets Ice Fang if you want ice coverage. It could be useful, and again on double attack, even 65 base power is like respectable. You do get Earthquake as well, which is down here. You don't have to worry about like Earthquake hitting your partner Pokemon because for the most part you don't have a partner Pokemon on the field. We'll get into that in a minute when I go over the sets, but like Earthquake is great because you don't have to worry about hitting your partner Pokemon because it's in your mouth and you don't do damage to it. The next part is, like, it does get Liquidation if you want to use a water type move without recoil. It gets Waterfall as well if you want flinches. It also gets like Rock Slide, which is usable, and then Body Press, which is really great because you're doubling your defense anyways. You really don't have to invest in your defense to make Body Press a really strong, powerful move. So it has like a few different moves that it can run based off the rest of your team. For the most part, I see this thing running like Protect, Order Up, Wave Crash, and Body Press, or Earthquake, right? And the reason I say Earthquake is because you can, I'll go over that when we get into the sets. And its egg move is like, okay. So now let's talk about this thing, like the potential sets that you can run with Dondozo, right? So the first set is like, I don't even know what item you can run on this thing. There's a bunch of items you can run. You can run like, something I can see a lot of is, like I would do this, is Clear Amulets, Water Veil, so that your stats can't be lowered and you can't be burned. And essentially this thing just will not, like, you can't lower this thing's stats. The only way to mitigate its damage output was like through Reflect, which in doubles is not nearly as effective as singles because it's only like 2/3 of the damage instead of half, or you take 2/3 damage instead of taking half damage. So yeah, like I would personally use like Clear Amulet Water Veil in this Pokemon. You could run other items like Lumberry and Unaware, but in general, I think this is the best moveset, the best like item ability combination. As far as the set goes, like you run Protect, you run your Order Up, you run your Wave Crash, and then you run, again, like I said, Earthquake, and then Terra Ground, so you can get rid of your Electric type weakness. Terra Ground is an option. You could run Terra Fight and go Body Press in this slot, or you could go like you're weak to Freeze Dry, Grass moves, and Electric moves. Well, there isn't a type that like resists all of those. You could Terra Fire to get rid of the Grass and the Freeze Dry. You could do Terra Steel to get rid of the Grass and the Freeze Dry. You could run Terra Dragon to get rid of the Grassy Electric. Like you have some options that you could do. I've seen a lot of Terra Ground, and I think it's just to make your, where is it? I've seen a lot of Terra Ground is just to make your Earthquake more powerful. Now the other set you can run, if you don't want to have to run like a Tatsugiri on your team, is like you could run like Assault Vest on this Pokemon to make up for that special defense, and then you use Oblivious so that you can't be taunted or can't be intimidated, and then run Wave Crash. You're probably not running Order Up on this set, so Earthquake, Body Press, Rock Slide is a set that you could run as well. Again, if you don't want to be weighed down by a Tatsugiri on your team. Now, Tatsugiri's arc gets interesting because you essentially turn the match by using Dondozo Tatsugiri into a 1v2. Which is like, it's not great because you have two Pokemon attacking one Dondozo, but Dondozo also has doubled stats in everything. And you, again, like with this fit specifically, you can't lower its stats or burn it. And with Tatsugiri, like, you're put into like a 1v2, right? Which typically is pretty not great. However, you can get rid of the 1v2 really quickly if you get this thing a Toxic Orb. You poison yourself at the end of the turn, and then you just slowly die inside the Dondozo's mouth, and then are able to switch out. And then obviously Commander, your movesets Protect, Muddy Water, Draco Meteor, and like any other fourth move you want. It could be Terra Blast and Terra into some other type. It can be Dragon Pulse. It can be Facade. It can be Taunt. It can be anything you really want to be. But in general, like you mostly, for the most part, I've seen like Toxic Orb or I've seen Black Sludge. Because it takes 8 turns to kill you with Black Sludge. It takes, I actually don't know what it takes. Hold on. Because it's 1/16 and then 2/16 and then 3/16, and then it takes 7 turns to kill you with or 7 turns to kill you with Toxic Orb because you have to get poisoned at the start of the first turn. So it takes 7 turns to kill you with Toxic Orb, 8 turns to kill you with Black Sludge. So yeah, like it'll take about the same amount of time to get this Pokemon killed anyways. And then the Pokemon that's been seeing like a lot of use on the Tatsugiri Dondozo teams is Flamigo, right? Because of its ability Co-Star. And this is why like the goal is to kill your Tatsugiri as soon as possible. Because then you get your Terra, whatever, I saw Steel the other day, Terra Steel Flamigo with like Lumberry or something. Co-Star, and then it was Roost, Brave Bird, Close Combat Protect. So I saw this as a very legitimate like core the other day. Wolf Glick used it on like a run to make reach top #1 in the world in the ladder. And the idea is that you keep the Dondozo alive long enough for the Tatsugiri to just die inside of its mouth, and then you get to switch Flamigo in. Then you have 2 Pokemon with Omni boosts. One of these Pokemon stats you can lower, because only one of these can hold Clear Amulet. Most of the time, I think it will be Dondozo. So like you can lower Tatsugiri stats, or sorry, you can lower Flamigo stats, but for the most part, like you're just gonna have Dondozo sitting there with an Omni boost, and it's hard to kill because it's really bulky. And even turning this thing into a Steel type, this thing like It doesn't have great defensive stats, 82, 74, 64. I'll go more in depth into this Pokemon in a later video, I think. But like, really great attack, really great speed. This Pokemon will come in and Oko things, or chip things low enough to where Dondozo Earthquake can kill it if you want to leave this thing as a flying type, right? So you don't have to Terra this thing, you can Terra Dondozo and then go Earthquake, like Terra Ground Earthquake. And so Flamigo just, as with the Omni Boost, chips things to pretty low for Dondozo to kill them off. So that's the core. As a general overview, I think it'll be really great in like best of one. Kind of. It's weird, right? If they're running like Clear Amulet Water Veil, it's good even in best of three, because it's just so hard to deal with. If they're not running Clear Amulet Water Veil, if they're running something else like Lumberry, Oblivious, it's a lot easier to deal with. Or if they're not running Clear Amulet and they are running Water Veil, it's a lot easier to deal with because it's just a matter of figuring out which one it is. But if they're running Clear Amulet Water Veil, I see it very hard to deal with in best of three. I also see this being like very hard to deal with against like. I think it's very strong against trainers or opponents who are like unprepared for it. The first time I ran into it, I was unprepared and I kind of got swept by it. But I think like once you're prepared for it and if you team build with this in mind, like it shouldn't be that hard for you to deal with. Like you lead two Pokemon that have good damage in a Dondozo, or you lead like a stall support like a support Pokemon that can deal with Dondozo pretty easily, like Amoonguss could deal with this Pokemon. It doesn't really have a way to hit Amoonguss. Unless it's running like Ice Fang. But even then you can like EV your Amoonguss or run like Terra Water Amoonguss and really wall this thing. So yeah. Again, it's great best of one, less good in best of three. It's great against trainers who are unprepared for it, less great against people who actually know the matchup. I know the matchup at this point. I ran into it once and I said, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And then I haven't lost to it since. So yeah, that's about all I got. I guess question of the day, I have a team built. Would we be interested in seeing like a breakdown of this, like an in-depth breakdown of this team, or just something brief before I start doing battling content? And then let me know if you have any suggestions for like what Pokemon you want to see next on this guide. I have a list of Pokemon that I want to do. However, if I miss something that's not on that list, I will be more than happy to cover it. So yeah, that's fairly straightforward video, pretty short. Battling content is coming soon. I finally started working on building my team in-game, so there's that going on. Yeah, so that's I think all I got. So yeah, have a good day. Again, let me know if there's a Pokemon you want to see next, and peace.